my father was attached to Anacostia Naval Air Station in Washington, D.C. And I was born in '43, and I had spent a total of 6.5 years in the United States Navy. Went into the service. I picked up the USS Roosevelt in 1962 in Palermo, Sicily. But it took me a year to get my classified clearance to work on certain radar and electronic countermeasure equipment. And I had no prior knowledge of anything about UFOs following the Roosevelt or anything else when I first came on board. They trained us on the state-of-the-art radar equipment. I was on midwatch during my second med cruise, and it was about sometime between midnight and 2 o'clock, and I had a contact come on the radar scope. This new radar that we had a SPA 50-inch repeater. We used to have SPA 8s and a VG, a vector guide that we plot aircraft on. So I know the difference between a flock of geese, or wave returns, or false echoes. Even we could generate false signals. The contact that I had on the scope was genuine, because this was between 65,000 feet and above, and the strength of the signal was as strong as the surface contact on the water of an aircraft carrier. This contact was huge. It was got my attention, and the attention of others that were on watch. There were 4 enlisted on watch and 2 officers at the time that this occurred. We challenged it and checked the codes out. It was not commercial, and then it began to move fairly slowly at first, and then very quickly. It was doing better than 1,000 knots. The first time I picked it up, it was hovering, it was stationary. Then it was doing about 1,000 knots. Then we contacted, it was over 500 miles away. And that high up, even though horizon line is at 18 miles on the Earth, when you have that high in altitude, you can detect aerial contacts at a much greater distance than line of sight, or UHF, let's say, communications. And so anyway, in this particular case, it was showing up on height-finding equipment, and it was showing up on radar equipment. The CO came in, and he wanted to know what the heck was going on here, and they looked at it and asked what the hell was that, and it got the attention of the captain at that time. Was Captain Clark, was my captain. My commander was Commander Gibson at the time. And there was only one person on watch in ECM, and before I knew, in a matter of 15 minutes, the ship was being turned, and 2 Phantom IIs were being prepared for launch. The Phantom IIs went to afterburners, and they were about 100 miles or so away from this contact, and turned on the conical scan radar to lock on, and it winked out. Just disappeared. I could see the 2 Phantom IIs on my scope, and this thing winked out. They flew around for about 10 minutes, and then they headed back to the ship. They settled down. This thing winks back on again, and it's about 12 to 15 miles from the ship, hovering at about 30,000 feet. It's a clear night, stars are out, and the lookouts, I can talk to them on my headphones here. Everybody's connected. Your air plotter, your surface plotter, your officer, your flag plot, the captain, or whoever the officer of the watch is up in the conning tower. And on an aircraft carrier, this is very serious business, because it's you have a lot of people involved and a lot of safety factors involved, and so it's not a normal thing just to fire things up that quick. And in any event, they went out, and the lookouts couldn't see anything. Nobody could see anything, but it was there on our radar scope. It was not a false signal. I never saw anything. I never left mine, but all I could hear were the reports coming over my headphones. And then the thing that really startled me the most was for the first time, I saw 2 armed Marines there. 2 Marines there, the one that usually stands with the captain, and they're outside ECM, and they wouldn't let me in there, and I had a clearance to be in there. And then I saw other officers there whom I had never even seen before. So something went down. Something went down. Now, the next morning, a lot of the Airedales were down there talking about, the weird operation that night and what had happened. And of course, I couldn't say anything, and I didn't say anything, because I was told by my CO that my CO told me, Jordan, this, what have you got in your log? This never happened. And I wasn't the only one there on watch that night. So anybody who was there at that time knows what I'm talking about and knows that it's the truth. But less than a dozen people knew what went on that night, and that ship had 5,000 men on it. Then after that particular med cruise, a few of us started talking about it, and I later ran into a Navy chief at the school up in OCS who told me a story about when he was down in the Caribbean, and they had a GQ, and they were on operational readiness inspection with the ships, and they saw this large UFO come up out of the water and take off as a part of the Navy records. It was real, and in this case, the contact was not leaving any kind of a heat signature. It was not leaving any kind of a trail. It was not moving at a speed which was proportional to the normal antenna rotation rate, given the contact signal coming back on the vector guide, given the plot, given the minutes I was making the fixes in 30 seconds. This thing was moving 10, 15 miles in 30 seconds, 20 miles, then 30 miles, then 40 miles, then 100 miles. And in virtually 3.5 minutes, this thing moved, almost 500 miles. And then moving from one altitude to another that would cause any normal pilot to black out, let's say, was very strange to me. This was a real contact, and this signal from this contact at that distance and that altitude was sending back a signal as strong as the Roosevelt itself, and the Roosevelt was over 1,000 feet long. It was a lieutenant commander whom I didn't know very well. He hadn't been on board very long, and he came over and he asked, what was up, Jordan? What do you got in your log? And he says, you don't need to put that in there. It's basically the gist of it. And now, to me, that was highly irregular to say that, particularly in ship's logs. I did have the contact logged in there, and I started writing in UFO, blah, 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 what the IFF returned, all the procedures. And here we had all this stuff going on. Never another word about it. But they really aren't sharing the meat and the source of where it all came from. And ultimately, they're not sharing the truth about UFOs. They aren't sharing the truth about UFOs. They are real. Period. And the planet is becoming intellectually celibate, in my opinion. People are walking around in a daze. They have no idea what is going on. No idea.